Imagine walking into a place where no one looks at you as a person, only as what they think you're worth. Imagine being spoken to with disdain, judged by your clothes, and silently told you don't belong. Now imagine if the one they rejected turned out to be a millionaire, not there to spend, but to understand. This is the story of a man who hid his true identity, only to be humiliated by the owner of a luxury restaurant. But when everyone turned their backs on him, one humble waitress stood up, not because she knew who he was, but because she still believed in kindness. This story isn't just about wealth or status. It's about dignity, respect, and the invisible lines we draw between people. It's about how humanity can still shine through the smallest act of courage, and how one simple gesture can change everything. Before we begin, I ask you to imagine yourself in his place, sitting quietly, in a room full of judgment, where every glance reminds you that money defines respect. What would you do? Would you stay silent? Or would you show them that true worth has nothing to do with luxury? If this story touches you, if you believe kindness still matters, please subscribe, share, and comment. Let this message reach those who need to remember that humanity is priceless. Because when one act of respect can transform a life, silence is never an option. The stranger in the corner table. The restaurant buzzed with the sound of clinking glasses, whispered laughter, and the subtle background melody that played every evening. It was one of those places where rich businessmen came to be seen, where waiters smiled politely while counting tips in their minds, and where appearances were everything. That night, however, someone who didn't fit that world sat quietly in the corner, a man dressed in plain clothes, his shoes dusty, his watch old, and his eyes distant. No one knew that this man, who looked like a traveler without a destination, was in fact one of the wealthiest men in the city. His name was David Graham, a billionaire known in the business world for his intelligence, precision, and an empire built on honesty and relentless work. Yet tonight, David wasn't here as the owner of anything. He was here as a stranger, to understand something that had been bothering him for months. Why the people he helped with jobs, donations, and salaries seemed to respect him only when he wore luxury. The restaurant was famous for its elegance, but also for something else, arrogance. The owner, Mrs. Thompson, was known for her sharp tongue and colder heart. She liked to serve only those who looked wealthy enough to matter. When she noticed David at the corner table, she frowned immediately. "Excuse." She said, approaching him. "This section is reserved for our regular clients. You may want to try the diner across the street." David looked up slowly, his voice calm. "I would like to eat here. I can pay." Her smile was sarcastic. "I'm sure you can. But our meals start at $50. We don't serve everyone." She glanced at his plain jacket and worn-out shoes. "You understand?" The waiters around her exchanged awkward glances. Some knew that Mrs. Thompson could be cruel when she wanted to prove her authority. Yet among them was a young woman named Emily, the newest waitress in the restaurant. She had only been there for 3 weeks, but she had already seen enough to understand the hypocrisy of the place. Emily noticed how Mrs. Thompson's tone shifted when wealthy clients entered, how suddenly kindness became a performance. "Ma'am," Emily said softly, "he's a customer like any other. We should serve him?" Mrs. Thompson turned sharply. "You don't tell me how to run my restaurant, young lady." David observed quietly. His expression didn't change, but something in his eyes showed disappointment. He had been ignored, disrespected, even insulted, but he remained calm. He was testing more than the staff. He was testing humanity. Emily approached him anyway, ignoring the owner's glare. "Would you like to order something, sir?" she asked kindly. David smiled faintly. "Yes, just a bowl of soup, please," she nodded. "Right away." When Emily left, Mrs. Thompson muttered loud enough for everyone to hear. People like him come in here just to waste time. No class, no money, no sense of where they belong. The comment made a few clients laugh softly. But David said nothing. He simply waited, his patience unshaken. When Emily returned with the soup, she placed it gently in front of him, her eyes full of quiet respect. "Thank you," David said. "You're the only one who looked at me like a person tonight." Emily blushed slightly. Everyone deserves that. As David ate slowly, he listened to conversations around him. Talks about investments, luxury cars, vacations, and expensive watches. None of it sounded real. He thought of his own beginnings, when he worked as a janitor in a small shop, saving coins for night classes. He remembered the nights he slept hungry, but dreamed of changing his life through hard work, not appearance. Suddenly, a loud voice interrupted his thoughts. A man at the nearby table had spilled wine and called for a waiter, loudly and rudely. "Do you people even know how to work here?" he shouted. Mrs. Thompson rushed to his side, apologizing, smiling nervously. David noticed how quickly she bowed before money. When he finished eating, he stood up and walked to the counter. "How much do I owe you?" he asked Emily. "Please don't worry about it," she whispered. "I'll cover it." "I'm sorry for how you were treated," but David insisted. "No, I always pay for what I receive." He handed her a card, black with golden letters. "This is for you." She looked confused. "What is this?" "You'll understand tomorrow," he said, and left quietly. The next morning, the restaurant opened as usual. Mrs. Thompson was already barking orders when a black luxury car stopped outside. Several men in suits entered, asking for Mrs. Thompson. "Mr. Graham would like to meet the owner," one of them said. Her face turned pale. "Mr. Graham? A billionaire?" When David entered, dressed sharply in a navy suit, everyone froze. Emily dropped the tray she was holding. It was the same man, the stranger from last night. Mrs. Thompson stammered, "Sir, I didn't recognize you yesterday." He looked at her coldly. "You didn't need to recognize me. You only needed to be kind." He turned to Emily. "Would you join me for coffee? I'd like to discuss something important." She hesitated, still in shock. "Me? Yes," he said softly. "You passed a test that many fail every day." The lesson was simple. Respect is free, but not everyone can afford to give it. Money can buy service, but not humanity. And sometimes, the richest hearts are found in the simplest people. That day, David made a decision that would change many lives, but that part of the story belonged to the next chapter. The offer that changed everything. Emily could barely sleep that night. The image of Mr. Graham, the man she had served soup to, now transformed into the powerful billionaire everyone whispered about, kept replaying in her mind. She wasn't used to such things. Her life had always been simple, predictable, and honest. Yet deep down, she felt something important was about to happen. When she entered the restaurant the next morning, everything felt different. The same people who laughed at her kindness yesterday now stared at her with envy. Mrs. Thompson was suddenly nervous, pretending to be cheerful, barking fake compliments instead of insults. The atmosphere was tense, but it was clear. Everyone knew Emily was now the focus of something bigger than the restaurant itself. A few minutes later, David Graham returned. This time, his car parked right in front of the entrance. The doorman opened the door respectfully as he walked in with quiet authority. The staff stood straight, eyes following him. Emily's heart raced as he smiled at her. "Good morning, Emily," he said warmly. "I hope I didn't make you uncomfortable yesterday." "You didn't, sir," she replied softly. "But I still can't believe who you really are." He chuckled lightly. "Sometimes, neither can I. But yesterday, I wasn't here as a billionaire. I was here as a man trying to understand people." She listened carefully, afraid to say the wrong thing. David continued, "When I saw how your boss treated someone she thought was beneath her, I realized how easily people forget what respect means. You, however, reminded me that humanity still exists." Emily smiled shyly. "It was just the right thing to do." "That's what makes it rare," David replied. Then, to everyone's surprise, he handed Mrs. Thompson a paper. "I've decided to buy this restaurant." The entire staff gasped. Mrs. Thompson's jaw dropped. You're buying it?" "Yes," David said calmly. "Effective immediately. The documents are ready. You'll be compensated fairly, but I will be taking full ownership today." Mrs. Thompson's face turned red. "But why?" "You humiliate me like this," David interrupted gently. "No, Mrs. Thompson. You humiliated yourself. This place could have been a temple of good food and dignity. Instead, it became a stage for ego." Emily stood speechless as David signed the papers. The transformation was swift. Within an hour, Mrs. Thompson was gone, her pride crushed under the weight of her own arrogance. The restaurant now belonged to the man she had tried to throw out the night before. After the legal formalities, David gathered the staff together. "I'm not here to fire anyone," he began. "I'm here to build something new, a place where customers are served with heart, not judgment." Then he turned to Emily. "You will be the manager." Her eyes widened. "Sir, I don't think I can." "You can," he said with conviction. "You have what money can't buy, integrity." Tears welled up in her eyes. The staff applauded, though some clapped, out of jealousy rather than joy. For the first time in her life, Emily felt seen, truly seen, for who she was, not for what she wore or where she came from. Over the next few weeks, the restaurant changed completely. The luxurious decorations remained, but the spirit was different. David visited often, not as a distant owner, but as a mentor. He watched how Emily treated the employees, how she spoke with patience, even to rude customers, how she solved problems without losing kindness. One evening, as the restaurant closed, David sat with her at a table. "Emily," he said, "I built my empire by focusing on profits. But lately, I've realized that money without purpose is empty." She nodded thoughtfully. "My father used to say, 'Rich is the person who can sleep peacefully after a day of honest work.'" David smiled. "Your father was wise." He paused for a moment. "You know, I once lost everything. Friends, respect, even my health, because I forgot that lesson. I thought success meant climbing higher than others. But true success means lifting others with you." Emily looked at him with admiration. "Then maybe you were meant to lose something back then, so you could find the right purpose now." Her words struck him deeply. For a moment, the powerful billionaire felt small again, but in the best possible way. "Perhaps you're right," he whispered. Days turned into weeks, and soon the restaurant became known not just for its food, but for its warmth. People came because they felt welcome, no matter what they wore. Emily introduced a simple tradition. Once a week, a free meal for the homeless. At first, some clients protested, but when David publicly supported the idea, the entire city began to notice. The story made headlines. Billionaire transforms luxury restaurant into place of dignity. But for David, it wasn't about publicity. It was about healing something inside himself, the part that had grown cold in the pursuit of wealth. One night, as he looked out the window at the people being served with smiles, he said quietly, "Emily, you've done something I never could." She tilted her head. "What's that?" "You gave money a soul." Her eyes glistened. "No, sir, you did when you decided to use it for good." David smiled faintly, and for the first time in years, he felt peace. But little did he know, A new challenge was about to test both his heart and his beliefs, something that would force him to face the very system he had built, the full circle. Weeks passed, and the restaurant flourished under Emily's guidance. David often visited, not to supervise, but to observe quietly from the corner table, the same seat where everything had begun. People treated each other differently now. The arrogance that once filled the room had been replaced by laughter and gratitude. One evening, as the sun dipped below the skyline, David sat with Emily after closing. "You've done well," he said. "Better than I could have imagined." Emily smiled. "You gave me the chance, sir. That was everything." David shook his head gently. "No, you reminded me of what money is meant for. It's not power, it's responsibility." For a moment, silence filled the air, warm and peaceful. The restaurant lights shimmered softly around them. David looked thoughtful. "You know, Emily, when I first came here, I thought I was testing others, but it turns out I was testing myself." She tilted her head. "And what did you find?" He smiled faintly. "That wealth means nothing if you forget how to be human." Emily's eyes softened. "Then you passed your own test, Mr. Graham." He looked out the window once more. Outside, a homeless man stood, staring through the glass. Without hesitation, Emily walked out with a warm meal and handed it to him. David watched silently, his chest tight with emotion. The man smiled, murmuring a quiet thank you. David whispered, "That's what real success looks like." The restaurant, once a symbol of vanity, had become a place of kindness. Emily led with humility, and David supported her vision quietly. People began to speak of the mysterious millionaire who had given up power to build compassion instead. But David didn't care for the stories. All he cared about was that, finally, he had found peace. As they turned off the lights for the night, Emily said softly, "Tomorrow we'll be busy." David nodded. "Good. Let's make it worth it." Sometimes the richest people are not those with the most money, but those who give the most humanity. And in that humble restaurant, both had become truly rich, not in wealth, but in soul.